Welcome to the NC DWI Guide podcast, where defenders of the Constitution assemble to prepare for courtroom battle and firm owners gather to develop marketing strategies that will revolutionize the practice of criminal defense. Here's your host, the NC DWI guy, Jake Minick.
Hello, fellow freedom fighters, and welcome to episode 13 of the NC DWI Guy podcast. Today, we have a special guest, Doug Scott, on the program. Doug talked with us last episode, so if you have not already listened to episode 12, go back and do that now prior to listening to this episode. Doug is a former law enforcement officer with more than 20 years of experience and hundreds of DWI arrests. He was the first certified DRE in the state of North Carolina, the first certified DRE instructor in North Carolina. He helped to get the DRE program off the ground here. Doug has attended countless seminars and courses on the pharmacology of alcohol, which you will hear more about today as we go through a mock voir dire. Doug's curriculum vitae is 50 pages long, showcasing his credentials to speak on a number of areas that he has been qualified as an expert witness in. And today we're excited to have Doug continue the conversation that we began last episode, and we're kicking it off with Doug offering a mock voir dire of tendering a expert witness. 2 hours, longer than that, just depending on the circumstances. But I thought we could just run through a kind of expert voir dire to qualify you as a witness. And so in terms of, maybe just kind of going through one in terms of like the pharmacology of alcohol, we could just kind of run through that briefly. So, I'm just going to pretend like we're in trial for a minute. Your Honor, I would next like to call to the stand. Defense would next call Doug Scott. Can you tell the court your name?
Yes, it's Julian Douglas Scott. I go by Doug.
And where do you live?
I live in Carteret County in Cape Carteret, North Carolina.
And Mr. Can you tell what the court about your educational background?
Sure. I have a Bachelor of Arts from North Carolina State University in political science and a concentration in criminal justice, and I've completed 3 graduate certificates, one in police management from North Carolina State University, one in forensic drug chemistry from the University of Florida, and one in addiction in the brain from the University of Washington.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Scott, tell me what your current occupation is.
I'm a consultant in the area of drug and alcohol impairment, and have owned a business called Drugs and Alcohol Risk Management Incorporated for about 20 years now.
Okay. And what prior law enforcement experience do you have?
I have roughly 22 years prior law enforcement experience. I began as a police officer in a small town in Wake County where Raleigh is located, Fuquay-Varina, and then changed after 3.5 years to the Cary Police Department, where I remained for 18 years. I had various assignments in tactical teams and patrol, but spent most of my time either as a traffic officer or a commander of a 10-man traffic safety unit, focusing on crash investigations and serious crash investigations and fatalities and impaired driving enforcement.
And so many of your assignments related to traffic law enforcement?
Yes, approximately. The entire time in Fuquay, of course, I was just a patrol officer, and the time in Cary as a patrol officer. Traffic enforcement is an integral part of that. but I spent specifically approximately 12 to 13 years of my time with Cary assigned as a traffic safety officer or a traffic safety team supervisor, commander.
And in terms of the training that you have related to alcohol and drug impaired persons, tell me briefly about what type of training that you have on that front.
Sure. I attended and successfully completed the IACP and NHTSA DWI detection and standardized field sobriety training curriculum in 1992, and also the instructor training curriculum in 1992. I successfully completed the IACP and NHTSA drug evaluation and drug classification training program in 1995, and the instructor training program in 1997, and was certified then from 1995 through 2007 as a drug recognition expert or drug recognition expert instructor. I have attended approximately 1,000 hours of training related to crash investigation, speed measurement, radar and time distance measurements, chemical analysis, alcohol screening test devices, and seminars specifically related to alcohol and drug impaired driving at the national level. I've attended 11 of the IACP NHTSA National Drugs, Alcohol, and Impaired Driving conferences, as well as a number of other specialized schools related to marijuana or club drugs, etc.
And were you involved in the foundation of the current North Carolina DRE program?
Yes. As the only DRE in North Carolina, I wrote a grant and founded the North Carolina DRE training program in the year 2000 and coordinated that program for the first 3 years that it existed, teaching officers in the first, I believe, 6 two-week DRE schools and all other aspects of that certification process.
Okay. And do you continue to attend training to enhance your knowledge of field sobriety testing and drug recognition?
Sure. I look forward to attending the National Drugs, Alcohol, and Impaired Driving Conference this year if it is not postponed due to COVID-19 pandemic. And as an example, but I have also, as another example, I'm currently enrolled at Harvard Med School in an online course for doctors, PAs, pharmacists, that is a pharmacology course, and enrolling in a graduate certificate at the University of Florida, which will begin the summer session, which is a medicinal pharmacology and therapeutics, which are 5 graduate level courses for doctors, PAs, nurse practitioners, pharmacists, and researchers.
And do you still teach some of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration curriculums?
Yes, I've taught now in the past about 1,500 law enforcement officers standardized field sobriety testing. But since leaving law enforcement, I've taught the NHTSA courses through the North Carolina Advocates for Justice primarily. About once a year, I've taught either the ARIDE, Advanced Roadside Impaired Driving Enforcement course for attorneys to participate and learn what the officers are taught through that course curriculum, or the standardized field sobriety testing course. We've alternated years, doing one course 1 year, and then the next we do the other standardized field sobriety testing. So yes, continue to teach those.
And in terms of your time as a law enforcement officer, did you have opportunity to arrest impaired drivers?
Yes, both as a patrol officer and even as a traffic sergeant and a traffic lieutenant. I continued to arrest impaired drivers throughout my law enforcement career. Arrested somewhere over 500. 500 is a conservative number. We didn't have digital records back in the 80s and early 90s, so I can't give an exact number. But I continue to arrest impaired drivers on through the year 2003.
And have you received training in the pharmacology of alcohol?
Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, just describe what that was.
Well, originally, there's a block of instruction on pharmacology of alcohol in the training received from the state of North Carolina to be a certified chemical analyst. But I've received training on pharmacology of alcohol in the training I received both in standardized field sobriety testing, and then again in the DRE school, there's an entire block of training on alcohol pharmacology. Again, I studied alcohol pharmacology in my graduate training at the University of Florida in courses on medicinal aspects of drugs of abuse and in forensic toxicology there, as well as virtually the entire 3 semesters that I studied addiction in the brain through the University of Washington Nursing School was related in great depth to alcohol pharmacology.
And as a normal course of your occupation and as an expert witness, do you routinely consult with other professionals in your field?
Sure. It's not necessary often, but I do maintain close ties professionally to discuss topics and share literature with who are experts in toxicology, pharmacology, vision science, and topics like that.
And as a normal course of your occupation and as an expert witness, do you routinely conduct independent study and research on topics related to your field as well?
Yes, I maintain a library of scientific literature that I've acquired through independent research. I do that by going to the University of North Carolina Chapel Hill Health Science Library, or the library in the past at Campbell University, which is near my last residence, and accessing their accounts with a number of scientific peer-reviewed journals and downloading those articles for future use.
And have you previously been qualified as an expert witness and given expert testimony regarding the detection and recognition of drug and alcohol impaired persons?
Yes, I've been qualified as an expert in that area over 225 times in 5 states now.
And have you previously been qualified as an expert witness and given testimony regarding drug recognition evaluations and the DRE program?
Sure. In North Carolina, superior courts and district courts, I've been allowed to give expert testimony on that topic well over 100 times.
And have you been previously qualified as an expert witness and given expert testimony regarding the pharmacology of drugs and alcohol, and approximately how many times?
Yes, and in North Carolina's superior and district courts, the state of Virginia, in West Virginia, and federal district court in Ohio as well. I've been qualified in that area and allowed to give testimony over 80 times.
And that is why, as I said at the beginning of this podcast, that I was not doing you justice in terms of my opening reading and introduction, because there is just a plethora of different studies and fields that you can give expert testimony on. I think for our purposes, we will kind of stop there. If we were going to continue, it probably would have been something that I might have elaborated on a few of those topics a little bit more if this was in court, would have kind of closed with asking Have you reviewed any of the documents or video related to this specific case that is in the courtroom? Were you present for the testimony that was presented earlier, whether by the state or by the defendant? As a result of the preparation and testimony you've heard, would you be able to have your testimony be based upon sufficient facts and data? Is your testimony going to be the product of reliable principles and methods? Have you applied those correctly to this case? So would have kind of gone further into that. And the reason why I think it's helpful to go through a sample of that voir dire is that I honestly think that one reason why we as defense attorneys don't utilize more expert witnesses is because we are not tasked generally with having to put on evidence. So in terms of having to lay a proper foundation, we're not used to having to do that, and it sometimes feels uncomfortable. But your expert hopefully would be able to kind of showcase, here is what I am equipped to give testimony on. Here is my curriculum vitae. Here are the questions that can be used to lay the proper foundation so that you can then tender me as an expert in this particular area. So it's not rocket science. It's actually pretty easy to kind of walk through that, walk down that path, even for an expert that is not used to testifying in court. So again, that's why I wanted to go through that, because I think it's helpful to just see, that again, it's very little work on my end to ask those questions. All of the work is on you to kind of explain, why it is that you're an appropriate witness for the particular case.
Yeah, I think that you made me think of a couple of cases. One, and it goes back to preparation, and two, it has to do, you mentioned ego for your profession. I've walked into cases before, into the courtroom, and had an attorney look at me just minutes before their case call and says, "I'm really nervous. This is the first time I've ever tried a case." But they didn't tell me that, and they didn't ask me for information, or they'd say, "Can you, the case is literally getting ready to be called. What kind of questions should I ask you to get you qualified? What should I qualify you as?" And they're waiting till. So I actually, and you know this, James, I have a go by that I send now of a minimum sort of bulleted questions to ask me in a somewhat. I mean, you just ask a great deal of them to help, because I nearly got left out to dry on the stand several times several years ago, because the attorneys just didn't prepare. They didn't know what to ask me, and you can't just say, "Have you been to college? Have you been a police officer?" "Well, Your Honor, I'm going to qualify tender Mr. Scott or the expert as an expert in because." And I really like hearing you say this, James. Remember the Daubert standard and make sure that you hit those three prongs in your during your voir dire and trying to tender each of your expert witnesses, and then go back when it's objected to by the other side, and remember to argue those and how you've met those three, knowledge, experience, training, education. You don't have to have a PhD to be an expert. I'm not. Have you had sufficient facts and data to review and to form your opinions, and have you applied those in a way that's generally accepted by the science or the community that you're within, giving testimony when that's so important. And I see so many attorneys that don't do that. Again, I think they're hurried, nervous, a number of things, but those are all great points you made.
And I think that it's really, been one of the things that's been helpful about the times that we've used you as an expert witness is it's not as much been about kind of, here is this, person that's going to kind of come in at the last second and, offer testimony in the courtroom. You just are constantly helping us learn what what the issues are and learn about the case. And, in terms of like preparation for court, you take the time, ahead of being in the courtroom for trial to say, here's, tell me what you want to ask me in terms of testimony. If you have concerns or questions about how to, walk through the process of tendering me as an expert, which I know that I probably pained you the first few times to kind of almost go through that process. Because again, I just, didn't have enough courtroom situations where I was actually tendering a witness in the courtroom. That just didn't feel very comfortable. So to have the ability to practice that before being in the courtroom, it just made things more smoother and made me feel more confident about being able to present that in the courtroom. So you've done an incredible service in terms of you're not charging hourly to kind of give that, level of preparation. That was all just kind of, hey, just spend whatever time you want to spend, making sure you're comfortable with the issues and questions and how you're going to kind of frame your direct examination. So yeah, very much appreciate that. And I really appreciate, Doug, you taking the time to come on and help us to learn how to improve our practice and how to better utilize expert testimony in the courtroom.
Oh man, it's been a pleasure. I hope that I didn't ramble too much. And
not at all. No, I love the stories. The war stories are always fun.
I've, we've become friends, I think, over, 10 years, 18 years, something like that. And I enjoy helping. It gives me purpose. I can't do it all for free, but that. I can't say it for all expert witnesses, but don't be afraid to ask for help up front and think about it. What's hard for me, and I'm kind of rambling here at close, is to be asked, well, what's your fee to do this case? And so I figure, well, based on time in district court or superior court, and then the attorney comes in and asks me for a lot of extra things. I have helped, and I do try to do that, but I'm sort of an exception maybe. So think about, as you prepare for a case and to use an expert witness, ask up front, how much we charge. And I would like for you to help me make a list of direct and cross-examination questions for this case. It's a felony. It's not this case is not a misdemeanor appeal. So I will need an expert report that I can provide to the district attorney. How much extra do you charge for that? Or at least make the expert aware of that. This is an appeal case. It's already in superior court. It's going to take longer than district. The expert may not be experienced enough to ask those questions, or may just forget to. So have a good conversation up front, and makes it all easier in the back again.
Yeah, I love that very, very much, Doug. That's helpful to kind of think through that. And again, I think at the end of the day, it's you're shooting yourself in the foot if you have the perfect witness on the stand to help communicate to the jury an issue that they need expert testimony on, but then you don't know how to present that person as an expert. And now all of a sudden that there is questions about whether or not this person is able to be qualified, or is actually going to be qualified in the particular fields that you need them qualified in to give the expert testimony. So it's not fun to discover how to make that happen in real time during trial in the courtroom. And it's, you see that I've seen that many times on, both in my own practice. I've seen it with defense attorneys. I've seen it in young prosecutors, that moment where it's kind of like, how did I not, why was this officer not able to talk about horizontal gaze nystagmus? And it's like, you didn't ask, the 5 questions that need to be asked in order to tender this person as an expert. So, spending that time preparing for that and letting your expert know, with you, this is not like a point of concern, but for an expert to kind of be able to go over with you their curriculum vitae in addition to just going over the facts of the case, because you want to make sure that that person is going to be able to actually testify in the courtroom and be able to get that helpful information about the facts into the actual record.
Right.
So again, Doug, thanks very much for coming on and taking the time with us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, James. Have a good day and stay healthy and safe, okay?
You too, Doug. Take care.
All right.
Hope you enjoyed today's episode of the podcast. If you did, please share the podcast with another freedom fighter in the criminal defense community, and be sure to leave us a rating on iTunes. See you next time.